Welcome back to Alyssa's Movie Takes. If you are new to the channel, I welcome you here. I do movie reviews and think pieces from a Christian perspective. And today we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Barbie movie. Is the Barbie movie a Trojan horse? So here to discuss that with me this morning is my good friend, Joseph Holmes. He is a film critic and filmmaker living in New York City. He also hosts the Overthinkers, co-host of the Overthinkers podcast, and runs the Facebook group where people have fun thinking deeply. And he is also my movie buddy. And so we get to talk about movies a lot. And we thought, let's not miss this opportunity. It's taken me a while, I've been on vacation. I also was like wary to watch it because he had written about it. And I was like, I'm not sure I want to go see this movie. But for the sake of the greater good, I did, and had fun. And here we are. So yeah, the topic today is Barbie a Trojan horse? So like, what is this movie teaching us? And I in college, had a few roommates that liked to watch things that I was uncomfortable with, but I found myself watching them anyway, kind of like just being glued in. And I remember just specifically saying a prayer like, God, give me discernment. So what he did through answering that prayer was just have me start to see like, what is the end goal of the content that I was taking in. So, and then in my senior year, I did a paper for a series of human nature class about like, what's the end goal of Harry Potter? What's the end goal of Twilight? Like, what are they showing us? And then in the Bible, there's a verse that I memorized around the same time, and it's from Colossians. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ. And the one that memorized was, I'll just do it from memory because even it's been a while, but I still have this one memorized because it just affects so many things, is see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depend on human tradition and the basic principles of this dark world rather than Christ. So one way it says elemental spiritual forces, and the other way it says basic principles, but they're both tied to hollow and empty philosophies that are tied to God, but they're tied to the world. And so I think that storytelling especially is a dangerous way to learn things that you're not supposed to learn, because it's how we've always learned, how a human being always learned sort of morals through stories, whether that's the biblical stories or, in Jewish tradition where you're learning the stories through the holidays that you're celebrating. Through Christians, it's sort of like Sunday school. But now, as you've written, Joseph, many people go to the movies in lieu of church. Like it's kind of a place of worship. And so they're learning their morals and they're learning their worldview through what they're watching. And so this movie is incredibly popular, as we all know. I mean, we're going to spoilers because we're a month into this now, but it's made over $1 billion by the end of its run, because this just has no competition. It will probably be the biggest movie of the year. And so it's really having an influence on a lot of people. So I just want to take us through 3 questions. What is this teaching us about women? What is this teaching us about men? And what is this teaching us about God? Let's start with, what is this teaching us about women? So I'll go, and then Joseph, I'll put it to you. Okay.
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. So what I immediately noticed, and because I had watched reviews going into this first scene where it's basically such an odd starting point, that this massive Barbie in the swimsuit kind of looking down on these little girls as they kill their children, right? Like, so Barbie taught girls to kill their baby dolls or to resent their children. Like even Helen Mirren at the beginning says something. Do you remember the quote?
Yeah. She says that talks about how the fact that the baby dolls were like the only dolls that existed for a while, and playing with babies can be fun for a while, but it gets old after a while. Just ask your mother.
Right. So even there's a little sarcasm of like teaching girls like, maybe my mom resents me, like maybe this is getting old for her. But what I saw through sort of the look at the Barbie dolls, because they live in this Barbie fantasy world, the Barbie dream house world, is that they say they discontinued Midge, who was the pregnant one. There are no like mothers and daughters in Barbie world. It's only single women. And so like the ideal in this world is just single women who like to have fun and have a good career. Where I thought that they went wrong in terms of just showing what little girls do with the Barbies and
Yeah.
Kens is marriage ceremonies.
Yep.
You can't innately change what little girls desire, which is like they're playing with their dolls and imagining marriage. They're playing with their dolls and they're imagining cooking. Like sometimes you bring yourself to the thing that you're offered, even when the thing that you're offered is like trying to make you rethink somewhat. And I think Barbies have done that in terms of helping little girls see like beyond the realm of maybe what they could.
Yeah.
But the picture that it paints is a pretty empty picture for women, is what I thought. Even though the lessons for men was clear, the lessons for women just seemed to be like, it's cool to be happy and single and find yourself. There's no real thing to aspire to other than like this ideal fantasy matriarchal world. What did you think they were teaching?
Okay, so this is really interesting. You've captured a really interesting piece of this that I think that people don't really pick up on, which is the fact that it treats the desires of women for independence and career and sort of a separate existence from men as normative for girls and women, and the desire for close interdependent relationships between men and women as culturally constructed. So like, again, in the Barbie world, which, like you said, is all of the women kind of are doing their own thing and kind of have these Kens, all friend zoned and kind of desiring to be in romantic relationships with them. But the, Barbies are not desiring that. They're desiring to do weird Citizens United court cases, which we all know 6-year-old girls are really into the minutia of the Supreme Court decisions from the late 90s, early 2000s. But that's the thing is that but the thing is they established in the world that the Barbies are kind of reflections of the girls playing with them. And like you said, I don't know if you've ever actually watched little girls play with Barbies, but to the degree that they buy the Ken dolls in particular at all, they buy them to be, the boyfriend husband of the Barbie. That's what they bring. And the Ken might be sort of like, let's say the himbo boyfriend, as they say, appendage, sidekick, like he was in the Barbie's Dreamhouse TV show, where he was like, he just existed to kind of be like Barbie's boyfriend and really like happily kind of stupid kind of, but like they might be doing that, but it's still like they're in a relationship is how girls play with those things.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is they don't portray it that way. They portray it as all these girls are wanting to play with Barbies as these, these happy, unattached, single women with their friend group. And then but the only time they actually are like, oh yeah, we want to be in a relationship with the Kens is when they've been brainwashed by the patriarchy. And then of course, that's such a fascinating reversal of like reality. Not only it's that, of course, it's in a sense, the opposite is true. Like, when girls are little, like they're playing, with them getting married. And then, when they get older and single, and they've had some disappointments with men, then they're like, okay, let's craft an identity myself, outside of that. And it's a similar kind of thing. I mean, boys tend to be more like, okay, we've got this independent thing, we're not playing with girls stuff. Then we become teenagers, or like become obsessed with girls, and then it's once the girls reject them, then they're like, okay, we're going to do MGTOW and stuff like that. And it's always tricky when you talk about how movies start out versus how they conclude,
right? Because
you can always make the argument, and people have, it's like, look, a lot of the things that the Barbies believe at the beginning are wrong, and they're supposed to be. It's like, there's some writing term for it, which is like the opening lie or something like that. There's a lie that they believe at the beginning that unravels as it goes on. So you always want to say, okay, how does it begin and how does it conclude? But that's the thing, is it also concludes with, the Barbies, reestablishing that world where basically it's a kinder matriarchy and the Barbies and Kens aren't in relation with each other. And the boys are kind of like these kind of happy, subservient creatures. And then Barbie herself is like, I'm going to want to leave this community for more independence with more. And again, it's not that like being independent, is at all wrong.
Mhm.
but it's not normative.
Mhm.
What's normative is that most people are not going to be, well, not going to be happy if they're not in tight-knit communities in relations with each other, and particularly men and women, if they aren't able to find each other and have, happy romantic relationships with each other, are not going to be happy. We have the data, of course, which is that, that Dr. Jean Twenge, who wrote the book Generations, she compared, the different generations, silent generation, greatest generation, the boomers, Gen Z, millennials, and found that, the earlier generations had tight-knit, families, with in extended families, with around communities, tight-knit communities, all believing in God. And then they had the least anxiety and depression. And then as each generation has gone on, they've had less tight-knit communities in that were built around nuclear families in that way. And each generation has gotten more and more depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is, we know that when that world is normative, people are happier. And of course, we know that it's real depression and anxiety because the suicide rates have also gone up.
Okay.
And that's been worse for women even than men, where it's like, it's like, okay, the more they follow the trajectory of independence and career orientation, the more anxiety, depression, and attempted suicide they've had. And again, it doesn't mean that, women shouldn't pursue career, or that, being independent is always a bad thing, but it can't be normative for a society in order for most people to be happy. And of course, if you're asking the question, why are we miserable? And how can we not be miserable, as this sort of is? It's like, why are women miserable and how can they not be miserable? The explanation they're given that we're trapped by these, and that's the other thing it teaches, that the reason that women are miserable is because we're trapped by these patriarchal standards that come from patriarchy. Which, and again, that's
the America Ferrera speech.
Yes. And the thing is, the analysis of where the problem comes from is wrong. Partly is like, the oppressive standards women feel for themselves don't come from the patriarchy primarily. There's been a lot of studies that, have come out talking about, like, about how the reason women put pressure on each other to be a certain way tends to be, even, when women socialize themselves that way, they don't get that. And just recently a study came out by Dr. Tanya Reynolds that was talking about how, cross-culturally, women and men, when they're children, their biggest blow to their self-esteem is how they look. And that doesn't vary across country. That's kind of the same thing. And that the other thing is that women tend to be obsessed with beauty standards based on how many eligible men exist in their particular communities. So if there's fewer eligible men, women start to pressure themselves to be thinner and to be more fit and stuff like that. And so all I say is that when they're saying, okay, here's the problem, we feel bad about ourselves, here's the reason, it's because society and brainwash and patriarchy are brainwashing us too. And the solution is get outside of communities and outside of kind of healthy, tight-knit relationships and be independent. Almost all of that is wrong from a social science perspective. And so I think those are kind of some of the things it's saying and some of the problematic aspects of it in the messages that it's giving. Yeah,
just movie-wise, my sister thought it was a bland movie. She and I kind of felt different ends of the spectrum when it comes to feminism. Like I'm definitely, like, I definitely believe in sort of early feminism and sort of women's rights for voting and but not super extreme. And she really liked Margot Robbie in the movie, and I just thought, like, her arc was so bland because I didn't like what her aspirations were. And when the matriarchy in the Barbie land is restored, she's like, peace out, because she had done one little thing wrong, and they the women, not the Kens, so the Barbies, excommunicated her for like one thing wrong, right? And so that's sort of like, it's like Mean Girls in some ways, like, which I would say, like, if we had this Barbie land society, it would very much look like high school, like Mean Girls. And so, but there was nothing in the real world that made me go, oh yes, Barbie is going toward that. Like she wants to be a
Hmm.
human because she wants to do XYZ. Uh
Hmm. Yeah,
other
to
than
develop that some more. That's really interesting. So Barbie arc didn't feel satisfying to you.
so Enchanted is sort of the comp in
Mhm.
this movie of woman in a perfect world ends up in the real world and then realizes that she doesn't want to be in in the sort of the fantasy world. She wants
Mhm.
to be in the real world. And for Giselle and Enchanted, I resonated with that arc because she had this like fairy tale guy, but he wasn't deep enough for her.
Hmm.
She couldn't feel sorrow with him. She couldn't express like her sad emotions with him. She couldn't, you know, have the same kind of joy that she had with the Patrick Dempsey character, and so she ultimately chooses to be with Patrick Dempsey. But she keeps basically her same identity.
Hmm.
She's a dress. She makes dresses in the fantasy world. She makes dresses in
Hmm.
the real world. She's just, and basically she just switches her ideas of what romantic partners are, which is she wants more depth than just this kind of fairy book person. Barbie comes to the real world in this movie, and she's gone because her person is thinking about death, and she finds that her person is not the little girl, or I mean the teenage girl, it's the mom, which they never show us why America Ferrera's character was thinking about death, which I
Hmm.
thought was weak because then there's no arc for America
Sure.
Ferrera. There's no like, oh, now I see that life is worth living, or like I can
Hmm.
reconcile my dark thoughts with my light thoughts. Like there's nothing that's there. While she was in the real world, there was nothing there that
Hmm.
she experienced nothing positive in the real world that would go, oh, she wants to be a real human being because of this thing. You know, the weird Barbie holds up these two shoes, the
Yeah.
high one and the Birkenstock. She's like, no, you need the Birkenstock. You need to see what the life is really like,
Mhm.
not this fantasy. And what she experiences in the real world is a fantasy in itself because it's not like the real world is more fantasy than the fake world. Like all the board members are men.
Yeah.
Like as soon
Yeah.
as
That's it's a satire. I mean,
cat called by 60 people, right? Like it just it's ridiculous. So there's nothing there that's like, oh yes, Barbie needs to go to the real world because she can fulfill this longing that's inside her that she found when she was on the outside, which Giselle did.
that's an excellent point. I think you point out something I didn't even consider this before, but like it's amazing because Enchanted was a much simpler story and was trying to do less,
Yeah.
but they still gave Giselle more complexity than they
Yeah.
gave Margot Robbie's Barbie because Giselle, like I said, had a passion that she liked to do. She liked to make dresses, and that was sort of a rule that was instituted after Little Mermaid got criticized for having her only be obsessed with the guy. Like, after that, Belle liked to read, Rapunzel liked to paint. It's like, so Giselle, she made dresses. And so that's the thing she loves to do. And of course, she goes there and she builds real complex relationships with people up in the real world. And those complex relationships can be like, say, yeah, I want to stay here for that. And you're right. When she goes, first of all, Barbie, when she goes real, she only exists to be stereotypical Barbie and to have relationships. And she even tells people over and over again, I don't want anything different. I just want things to stay the same. And we're never given until like the very end a reason to disagree with her
Mhm.
about that, because the only thing that does seem to be motivating her is to go back to normalcy. There's nothing underneath that's another passion that she wants to do that she can't do. Now, I will say, because I know we'll get pushback on this, and I will say she does seem like when she's in the real world, she's appreciating the ability to have a range of emotions. Like she cries a few times and she's like, so that whole thing of like, I don't want things to change, I want things to be perfect, versus like, oh, I can have a complex range of emotions now. That is something that they do show about the real world that she values. There are a
Okay.
couple things. One is it stays too abstract because it's not, built on tight knit bonds with real people. She never develops a real relationship with Gloria, who's America Ferrera's character, and Sasha that becomes deeply meaningful. She says, well, I want to stay with them, rather than being Barbie.
Right.
She never, and her crying never builds itself out into like, well, why do I want to stay here for that? It does feel like she's just sort of become just enlightened enough to not be able to be satisfied being happy in Barbie land. And so she's really more leaving that than going into the real world, which we talked about the problematic things of like Frozen 2 that does this too, which is this, I feel this dissatisfaction with where I am, and I'm going to sing a song about it, and therefore I'm going to leave my relationships and responsibilities to go off into the woods. It's like really bad advice, really bad advice. But I think you're right. They don't actually make the real world a place. They don't give her a real passion to drive her as a character, and they don't tie that to the places she ends up going in. So that's that. I can see that how that would not resonate with you.
Yeah, and bringing it to the real world, like our world. I think that a critique of that type of pursuit by women, it's not uncommon. Like I don't know what I want. I just want to leave this.
Yeah.
Right. It does lead to depression and anxiety because you, as many psychologists will tell you, you go with you.
Yeah.
Like in your next thing, and if you don't really know what you want, and if it is something like love in a family, which at least love, maybe not all family, but at least love, like I don't know any women nor men who are like 100% content being single.
No, you at least need to have community if you don't have romantic love. And the problem is that whole phenomenon of I feel unsatisfied here, I want to go somewhere else, harms both of those kinds of attachments.
Yeah. So the idea of like you don't need community, you don't need love, really. I mean, she didn't need Ken, and Ken was a light a shallow character, so maybe she didn't need a shallow character, but they didn't give us the Patrick Dempsey character for her to fall in love with either.
And they didn't develop the relationship with Gloria and Sasha to say, okay, well, I want these relationships.
Yeah, I want this community instead. Yeah. And so I just basically think it's like shallow independence is the lesson that women are being given.
Yeah.
And
if you're unhappy, that is a sign. If you're unhappy, that's a sign you should leave.
Yes.
Even if it's, again, like she restores the matriarchy. It's not like they're in an abusive patriarchy anymore that she needs to escape from. They restored everything that's good, and even made improvements. Like, hey, we're not going to cast weird Barbies out anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and then she's still like, no, these relationships don't matter anymore. It's like, well, why? Why is the relationships you have in the real world superior to these ones? Yeah.
So like the idea of just chasing after sort of the next thing is a bad lesson, and just independence without real community is also a bad lesson. And I would even say like the piece about that they don't do romantic relationships at all.
Yeah.
Between the Barbies and the Kens is just dissatisfactory for little girls. Like this it means it's not made for little girls, because they're naturally going to play marriage and boyfriend friend, and they don't do that at all.
It is, and I hesitate to use this word, but it is sort of gaslighting little girls into thinking that their romantic desire, their attachment to children, to wanting to be mothers, their attachment to wanting to be in romantic relationships is cultural brainwashing rather than biologically and divinely normative and positive. It frames it in that way, which is, regardless of anything else, it's just a lie.
Yeah, it's just a lie. So let's move to men. What do we think? Men. So, or about a man's world, potentially, men or a man's world. You can go first in this one.
Okay, cool. Sure. Yeah. So I've had a few discussions about this. And I think that there are a couple of problematic aspects of how they talk about men in this. They do spend a lot of time on Ken and his arc. And so they say a lot about men in this. That's one of the things that's always funny. People talk about when men complain about how they're portrayed in this. I had this discussion with somebody. It's like, this is something for girls, why do you have to always make it about men? And it's like, well, Barbie movie made it about men. Like they told us this is what women are like, and this is what women's experience is, and this is what men are like, and this is men's experiences. And so when men say, well, problem with this. You know, it's not out of bounds. And so there are two things that I think are problematic in what they talk about regarding men. Now, I think what they do well in terms of talking about men is that they do address the problem of that men feel like in our society that they're in Barbie land and they have a deep dissatisfaction with that. You know, there's a high growing number of men in society that believe that discrimination against men is just as bad and just not just as prevalent as discrimination against women. And that's kind of going on gender lines. Like the younger and younger they are, the more men are likely to say that. And increasing numbers of men and women are saying that. But there's a feeling by men, because, you know, men grow up, you know, primarily not being raised by their fathers, whether because their father's working most of the time or because they're you know, they don't have fathers because of divorce and stuff like that, and others typically get. And the vast majority of the teachers are women, neither of which were true, like, you know, 100 years ago, or a couple, you know, prior to the Industrial Revolution, like most everybody was working in the home, both men and women, and so the raising of men was and children was done, you know, most tracts of how to raise children were addressed to men, you know, fathers. And so like the father was much more hand in raising, and also most teachers were men. And so like now, like there's very much been a shift in our society where most of the raising of people is done by women. And so there is a sense in which many boys in society, particularly because, again, now most college graduates are women, you know, most high school graduates are women, and most high school graduates, you know, the top honors go to women. So there's definitely a sense in which most men, unless they break through to like the upper echelons, feel like they live under Barbie land. They live under the, you know, the where women have the power especially when they're growing up. And they feel like, okay, I have to be, you know, I can never complain. I have to always be nice in order to be, you know, in order to be affirmed. And then, of course, if they make it, you know, but they also feel demeaned and kind of taken for granted and not valued. And, you know, and in romantic relationships, women tend to, you know, want people who are older than them and have more money than them and stuff like that. So there's just, when men are growing up, they feel kind of in the Barbie land situation. And so they kind of take a look and they say, okay, you know, they says, okay, when men have actually experience of like, oh, being in sort of men's culture and under men's influence in the workplace or wherever that is, where they find, you know, or online, where they find communities of other men that say, hey, actually, you don't deserve to be demeaned and taken for granted and just told how awful you are because you're men. You know, you deserve to be a king. You deserve to be, you know, whatever it is. You know, men start to say, oh, yeah, I really like that and want to pursue that. The thing is, what this movie does is that it takes that experience that men have, and they say that to a certain degree, they're like, yeah, men shouldn't be treated badly. But they do say that the problem with that is that it's going to turn into, you know, men being toxic and oppressing women. And the solution, therefore, is for men to, you know, stop desiring to kind of have that ascendancy of being in male culture and then just be satisfied with who they are and where they are. And there are a few problems with that. You know, the first is that, you know, they kind of say like the problem that with Ken was that he wanted to be with Barbie too much. Like he was codependent with her. And when he went, you know, and found a man's world, his problem was that he was attracted to male dominance instead of, you know, just asserting his dignity. He was attracted to male dominance. What's interesting is and what he needed was to just be satisfied with himself where he is. Mm-hmm. The problem is it's almost exactly the opposite of that. Like we said with the women and the men, there's nothing actually wrong with men deeply desiring to have relationships with women. You know, Ken's desire for Barbie, there's nothing actually wrong with that. There's nothing disordered about that. And the fact that he feels bad about that and feels bad about not having her and not, or at least a Barbie, even if it's not her, and when he goes to the man's world and real world, what's fascinating is they show the fact that it's like, oh, he wants to have the power in the man's world, but he doesn't have the education to do it. Doesn't have the, the swimming lessons or whatever. And what's fascinating is that
he says, can't even beach here.
I can't even beach here. Yes.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing is for men, in men's experience, the thing is, what Ken does wrong then is not trying to institute patriarchy in Barbie Land. What he does wrong is he doesn't go and try to get an MBA. He doesn't go and try to actually, put the work in to actually, get swimming lessons so he can be a lifeguard. He doesn't say, the problem that they say is that he wants that kind of responsibility and authority. And at the end, they say, I never really wanted the responsibility and authority. I just want to go back to being, yeah, exactly. Just wanted the horses. It's like, but we know, partly, through data and partly through the anecdotes, that doesn't actually solve the problem for men. For men, just take a look at the popularity of, somebody like Jordan Peterson, whose entire message is you're not enough just as you are. The reason you feel bad is because you're not living up to your full potential about who you could be. And so the answer is to not be satisfied with where you are and actually put in the practical steps to be who you could become. And the response, of course, by men online is to put comments under the YouTube videos saying, I'm going to unalive myself. Sorry, YouTube algorithm. I listened to your videos and I put yourself in the practice and now I have a happy life. And so the advice they give to men in the Barbie movie of how to actually fix the problem is going to make them more miserable. Just like with the Barbies, just like with women, it's like the advice they give to men of how to fix this and what they did wrong is going to make them more miserable. The second aspect of this that I think is deeply harmful and perhaps even more harmful to society at large is in their representations of men. They give men two choices. And I've coined the terms that you can be doormat Ken or douche Ken. And, the Ken who
and you'll
is
be writing
not
more about this soon.
Yes. I'm going to be, check out, look out for this. But the idea is that all of the men who are good in the Barbie movie, and this is true of basically all of Greta Gerwig's work, and is all the men who are good are doormats for women who allow themselves to be mistreated by them. When Ken is at the beginning of the movie, he allows Barbie to mistreat him, and that's not her mistreating him is not treated as a positive thing, mind you. But the only time he ever stands up for himself, or anybody in this movie stands up for themselves for how they're treated by the women, is when Ken is the douche Ken, when he's being patriarchy Ken, that's the only time he ever stands up for himself. And once his evil patriarchy is broken, then all of the Kens, he and all the Kens, stop standing up for themselves and just accept whatever treatment the Barbies do with them. And lest you think that this is just like particular to the Barbies and the Kens, this is also how they treat, and again, even Alan, when he goes and he saves the Barbies, immediately after, not Barbies, Gloria and Sasha, immediately he gets demeaned and told to shut up and, and treated like garbage afterwards. And he accepts that treatment.
Yeah, and he accepts it. Yeah.
And then, the husband.
And he's basically their servant.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like
he's their sidekick.
He's their servant.
Yeah, exactly. Then the other thing, but then it's that Gloria's husband and Sasha's father, he is treated, like a dimwit that you can just, put down with impunity. And he takes that. He never stands up for himself. Greta Gerwig is crafting a vision, because she sets up what's problem with men and women's relationships. What's the problem? What's wrong with why women feel miserable? Why do men feel miserable? And what's wrong with male-female relations? She sets out gender solutions. Like, what is it? What is the positive vision of the world she wants? The positive vision world she gives is, a world where Ken's, whether it's, Ken's or Alan's or the husband, Gloria's husband, are happily in the doormat Ken position. That's the vision of the world that she portrays as positive. Here's the thing. There's somebody else who also says that's how women see men and how women see the vision, have their vision of gender equality. It's Andrew Tate, who is a rampant misogynist online, who's telling men that the only way for them to be happy is to dominate women. And he's saying, this is how women see you. You know, in a world of gender equality is going to end up with gender oppression because they think a good man, you know, is being a doormat. And he says, you can either be a dominant, douche Ken, or it can be a doormat Ken, and you should choose douche Ken. And, again, feminists and women will, say up and down that that's not what they believe. It's like, no, you can be a good man who's not a doormat, stuff like that. But they also affirm movies like this and go see it to the tune of $1 billion.
Right.
And tell, like I said, the news story, break up with their boyfriends if their boyfriends don't like the Barbie movie. And so I think that what it teaches, in a sense, what it teaches women is to see men who stand up for themselves as abusive and toxic. And it teaches men that the only way that they're ever going to get respect, because the only time that they're ever given affection or respect by women is in the patriarchy in the real world, or in the patriarchy that Ken institutes in Barbie Land. If the being the douche Ken is the only way they will get a respect and affection from women, and that is one of the absolute worst things that you could try to teach men in this day and age.
Right. Yeah. Greta Gerwig, I think you said it, that she makes her best movies when she's not trying to make a point.
Yeah.
And Ryan Gosling, so there's the message that kind of comes across that it's better to be a doormat man, and there's not really a place for you in a Barbie world.
Yeah.
And men deeply struggle with that right now, that there's not a place for them in the world. And you've opened my eyes to that a little more. But one of my favorite scenes where I do think that the lesson for men is good, or at least like unintentionally, is Ken as the innocent, Ken as the innocent man, Barbie as the innocent woman in the real world, kind of discovering what's happening. And Ken is just, and Ryan does an amazing job. It was just like the discovery, oh my gosh, like respect and honor. And and there's like a middle-aged mom with a daughter, and she's not like super kind to Ryan, but she's not like super mean either.
No.
He's fascinated by learning about the patriarchy with his stack of books. And she just asked him, she's like, do you have the time?
Yeah.
And like the look on Ryan's face, I just thought on Ken's face, played by Ryan, like he just did an amazing thing that I think is very true for men. Like this woman looked to him looking for help, and in the simplest way, like, do you have the time? It was such a big deal. And like, me, like, you're looking at me, like you're making place for me, like just a little bit of respect. And it wasn't even affirmation, right? Because he was, they say he was just, Ken didn't have a good day until Barbie looked at him.
Yeah.
Right. And so this woman there's no romance there at all. She's probably a married mom, but just her asking Ken the time just lifted him up.
Yeah.
And to me, that spoke to what is a truth. I don't know if it's what's teaching men, but that men are in an affirmation desert, I've found. And that can lead to that resentment that leads to that more like misogynist.
Men still remember that one compliment that they got in high school, that still go back. And so you're right, there is that kind of affirmation desert that men often feel. The problem is that they always tie his desire to have that with something toxic.
Right.
It's his villain arc to do that.
Right. It's his villain arc. Yeah. And villain arc, which is sad. Like he ends up with 6 watches, but like,
I know.
It's like that was like, oh my gosh, like he was so craving affirmation that the one moment he got respect, he just wears it on his sleeves.
It's the thing is, they never show a vision of what it would look like for a man to say, okay, I'm going to live in a world where I'm treated this way, or I'm going to live my life so that I earn being treated this way, or I think of myself this way. They don't give men an actual way of doing that, of living that kind of life that's outside of a toxic framework. Like in Black Panther, like it's like in Black Panther, there's this whole thing of like the villain is kind of right, you know, where it's, and so what, you know, Black Panther does is he changes how Wakanda does things in order to accommodate the way the villain was right. And so like, okay, here's a way that we can work for a better world for, you know, Black people around the world, you know, and without, you know, becoming the thing we hate. And they don't ever do that with the Kens, where they say, here is another way for you to be treated justly and to assert your own right to be treated. That's the thing. There's no way for you to assert your own right to be treated justly outside of being a douche Ken. They never give that. And therefore, again, it's the Kens go back to, you know, it's like, maybe we'll give you, maybe we'll give you a lower court. And the Kens are like, you know, we accept as long as we get to wear robes. Again, it's like going back to the subservient thing. That's when the world is restored.
Yes. What would you say to people who might say, like, with the Barbie world, like, it's about time. Like, it's been a guy's world for a long time. So it's about time we had this kind of world.
So I think it's, I mean, so yeah, I mean, do you mean like this world in fantasy, or it's about time for the real world to become a matriarchy, kind of?
Or to become a matriarchy, right? Like, because I think I hear it from women, like, well, you've had your chance, it's our turn. Sure. That kind of thing.
I mean, there's a few things wrong with that. You know, the first is that you can't on the one hand say that it was wrong for us to do that, for men to do that to women all this time. And then also say, well, you got to do it now, we get to. You know, it's either was always morally wrong then, and it's morally wrong when you're doing it now. So now it's objectively morally wrong when you're doing it. Or you can say, well, it wasn't wrong for you to do it then, but now it's our turn. You know, you have to pick one or the other. Right. You know, it was either always morally wrong, and so it's morally wrong for you, or it wasn't morally wrong for us, and now you just have decided it's your turn. Okay. So you have to pick one, first of all, is what I would say. Second of all, I don't think that there's a lot of evidence that that's going to make anybody very happy, because, you know, women aren't happy when there's a whole bunch of men who are either boys that they need to take care of, or talk like when your options are, you know, are doormat Ken or douche Ken. Women aren't happy in that world either. So like for them to create, this is the vision of what Kens are allowed to be like, you know, that's not good for women. No women I know wants that to be the world. In fact, they look at the dating world, that's all they complain about, is that there's only doormat Kens or douche Kens. And so, so it's like, so that's not good. The other thing is, and I don't like, this is kind of, you're only, so Michelle Wolf, who's a comedian who is just a feminist comedian, she did a whole joke that was kind of interesting, where she said, you know, women, we really don't want equality. We want to oppress men the way they oppressed us. Yeah. The problem is we know if we did that, men would just take their strong arms and, you know, knock us off the table and put oppression back in. So we'll settle for equality. I think the only claim that women have on, you know, having, you know, dismantling the patriarchy is that it's the right thing to do for men and women. It's and that we want to create a better world for everyone. That's the only moral authority and if you're instead saying it's just about power and, you know, it's our turn to oppress you now, what you are saying is you want the people who are objectively stronger than you to accept being oppressed by you for no moral reason, just because we can. I don't think that is going to work long term. What you're going to create is a moral framework that the people with stronger arms are just going to knock you off the table. So I think that there's no moral justification for that. There's no you know, self-interested justification for that. And there's a very good self-preservation reason to not make that argument.
Okay. All right. So let's turn to our final piece of this. And Greta Gerwig has made it clear in interviews, in Margot too, but Greta has more of a religious background, I believe, than Margot, that there are some God and Eden elements in this. Sure. And they show up in the creator, Ruth, the creator of Barbie, Ruth, that Margot Robbie's Barbie character has two conversations with her. What are the lessons that we are seeing that this movie talks about with God?
Yeah, do you want to start with that, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, so I struggled a little bit because to see it. I've seen it once. I think you've seen it twice. So
I've seen it twice. Yeah.
yeah, so I struggled to find what they were actually trying to say, except that the God character is saying, "You do you."
Yeah.
And so, like, one of the lines that she says is, "You don't need." Barbie is saying, "Should I become a real girl?" And
Yep.
the creator is saying, "You don't need my permission to do anything. You know, you can ascend to human
Yeah.
steps if you want to." And then the other time she sees her is she's on a chase in the real
Yeah.
world. And I don't even remember the speech, but it wasn't very inspiring.
Yeah.
And then they introduce you to a world, the Barbie world, which is supposed to be like Eden, right?
Yeah.
It's a perfect world. It's a perfect day.
Yeah.
They sing the song every morning. And then Barbie wakes up one morning with thoughts of death and things are not going well. And so it's sort of the fall without the reason for the fall. I didn't love the God piece just because I didn't think they made a very clear message. But it's basically the "you do you," which I think is one of the most dumb theological things to say. But it's very much in our culture of like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm religious, but I'm not, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Like I can
Yeah.
do the God when I want, God when I want kind of thing. Like he's the God in my pocket. He's my genie in the bottle, right?
Yeah.
That's essentially what I got from the God piece in this.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent. No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, it's one of the funny things that about this movie and the different think pieces that are on it is that whenever you kind of point out things that are going on in it, there are people who will say, "Well, that's not what's going on in it. It's the other thing that's going on in it." And but there's a lot of consensus that like sort of and Greta Gerwig is like very open about this. She talks about Ken and Barbie as being a reverse Adam and Eve, where like that, Adam was Adam was created first and Eve was created to be his helpmate, and in this it's like Barbie was created first and Ken was created to be an accessory to her, and so then of course they have a perfect world which is an Eden, and then shame comes in, whereas like, oh, I feel ashamed of my imperfections that she didn't even notice before. And so the Aiden story is definitely very explicitly there,
Right.
But you're right, they have the fall without the reason for the fall, because and a lot of Christian commentators, and I've been baffled that most of them haven't pointed this out, but it's like, but they talk about, oh yeah, shame comes into the garden. It's like, well, no, first came guilt and then came shame. It's like, first it's like I did something wrong, I disobeyed God, the world is supposed to work a certain way according to certain rules, and I violated those rules, and that caused the problem. There's no disobedience that results in a fall. It's just intrusive thoughts,
Right.
And so it's
happened to her rather than something she did.
Yes, so there's shame is the originator of the problems rather than guilt being original for problems. And Tim Keller's one of his last books he wrote before he died, called Forgive, he unpacks this philosophy that's taken root post like the last 100 years, that is we don't feel inadequate in ourselves because of anything that is actually wrong with us. We feel inadequate because of other people imposing kind of ideas on us and feeling shame. So it's shame is the problem. Us feeling bad is the problem, not the reason that we feel bad. That's the problem. Yeah. And how toxic that is, because it doesn't work. He's saying, look, we've had 100 years of this, of just saying, don't feel bad, just, don't feel bad. You have nothing to feel bad about. And we still continue to feel worse and worse. So that idea that shame is the original thing rather than sin, rather than guilt, is a very untrue and very toxic philosophy. But that is what is being done in their framing of the Garden of Eden story. To the other point about God is that to the degree that God imposes some ideas of what people should be like and what they should do and be like, it's considered bad. Barbie being created with this sort of standard of beauty, Ken being created as an accessory to Barbie, the things they're created to be are bad. you know, and then, but the only, so if Mattel is God in a sense, or if the people playing with the Barbies are God to the degree that they are, you know, doing stuff to them, making them weird or stuff like that, you know, that's, you know, an abuse that they're doing. Or the only time a God character is considered positive, and Ruth is like probably the best analogy to God because she created the original Barbie and she ran Mattel for a while, and because she, you know, she when she's talking to Barbie, she has the most God kind of like relationship, and also does the whole Michelangelo thing of their hands touching and stuff like that. So there's a lot of God stuff in there. But you're right, she is a God who does not have any authority or impose any obligations on her, and says, actually, the way I created you to be is beautiful, and you should embrace that, and that's how you'll be happiest. It's like, no, I have no, you know, nothing I can impose on you. There's no rebellion against me. You don't even need my permission. And what's so funny is, again, I originally wrote this in connection to like why Greta Gerwig shouldn't direct the Narnia movies, because The Magician's Nephew, the exact opposite happens. It's getting permission from Aslan to eat from the fruit that actually makes it okay to eat the fruit. That's explicitly, it's like, you know, it's not eating the fruit that's wrong. It's that you didn't get permission from Aslan, from the God figure, to do it. And so that just blew my mind when I realized the incongruency there. But that's because C.S. Lewis has an idea, which is a more Christian idea, which is that God does have authority to be able to make demands on us. And that's a whole thing with Greta Gerwig. She always portrays authority figures that makes demands on people as bad. You know, whether it's, you know, the publisher in Little Women, or whether it's, you know, any authority figures in the Catholic Church. The authority figures in the Catholic school who are good are ones who just kind of say things that are, you know, kind of kind and advising, not ones who make any sort of demands on them. So I think that's that vision of God, that anything that says you were created for this, live into this, you were created for a purpose of it, is evil. And any authority figure that simply creates you and then lets you go on, sort of like as a mother figure is supposed to do, as they say, we stand still so that, you know, our kids can see how far we come, whatever, is positive. And I think that's any picture of God, therefore, that makes demands on you, you know, because any authority figure does it. Any picture of God that makes demands on you is evil and problematic. And therefore, I can't imagine her doing a positive or good portrayal, a faithful portrayal of Aslan or Narnia. Can you imagine, like, outside of his kingship, like a non-kingly Aslan? So anyway, but
yeah, so yeah, it doesn't sound attractive at all. And if to hear more of your thoughts on that, you can check out the Religion Unplugged article that Joseph wrote on why she's the wrong person to direct Narnia, which I agree with. So bringing it back to the verse that I mentioned at the beginning, the Colossians, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and philosophies, which depend on either spiritual elemental forces or basic principles of this dark world rather than on Christ. And so I just see in this movie sort of two things coming to play. And on one side, it's like, I don't know what to call it other than like female dominance and male dominance is sort of like what it is, kind of trying to sneak in, the Trojan horse that trying to sneak. Neither of them, I think, is godly or right. So and as you were thinking through like these things that are kind of coming into play with Nietzsche, it's his thing was the overman. Like there's this like ultimate human being, like almost superhero, like you become the ultimate version of just yourself. And then on the opposite side, there's a character in sort of Jewish tradition, and she's become sort of this feminist icon of Lilith, who sort of represents this female domination. And
which ironically in The Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, they describe what's her face, the White Witch, as originally coming from Lilith. But
so essentially the narrative that we're being fed subtly through Barbie is a Lilith narrative, which is a White Witch narrative, which is like, it will be better when, you know, you have full independence and power, outside of Community, which is basically the White Witch in Narnia, right?
Yeah.
Like she creates kind of a Lilith world for,
Yeah.
and the Narnians are not happy, and she's a god unto herself, and she is the one who eats the fruit without permission,
Yeah.
and it eats her soul. And then yeah, so I think that those are things that I believe in, that we have an enemy in this world, and that he's trying to get us to a place where we're unhappy and miserable, and he wants us to be destroyed. That's what I see in scripture. And so
Yeah.
he can't do it directly. He'll do it indirectly, and he'll do it in things like getting it into the narrative in our head, so that we are like subtly starting to believe more and more
Yeah.
of what he wants the world to be, rather than what God wants the world to be, which God wants the world to be for human flourishing and human community and in loving relationships. Being careful to see what's underneath the surface
Yeah.
and help us just to see, like, is this message, is this lesson for my betterment, or is it for my destruction?
Yeah. And like sorry.
As a woman in this, to see like, nope, this message is for my destruction, not for my betterment. I can recognize that and say no, but I can also say in prayer, Lord, do not let us be deceived by this hollow, empty message, but instead give us your truth and your story.
And like, I'll say, like, with the Barbie movie, I understand like a lot of people who really enjoy it. Like, I'm not down on, people who enjoy it. And I know that for a lot of people, there's been the fact that some of the existential questions that women and men kind of face are brought to light in an explicit way.
Yeah.
And are given voice in kind of a fun way, in ways that aren't often done. That for them, just that has for many people been very dignifying. And so like if you're enjoying, and if you enjoy it as a fun movie and you're enjoying it as something that the positive messages that are in there about like, look, it's okay to love yourself even if you have cellulite, and things like that. If like that's all great and good. I just think it's like, you should also be aware of the other things that are going on in here that are more negative, and not pretend that those things aren't also in there.
So yes, you're right. People can have fun with this. I had fun. I had fun watching Ryan Gosling. I think he was the best part of this, just because he brought such humanity to the doll aspect and sort of this archetypal Ken, and he got to parody himself. But the nuances and the beautiful moments I found were mostly with Ken for me. But the Trojan horse elements, that there really are some like philosophies that lead you to unhappiness, both men and women, and on a larger scale to God, outweigh the fun for me in this.
That's fair. I think I would agree with that for myself too.
Okay, cool. Well, Joseph, thank you for joining me today and talking about.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Where can people find you if they want to connect with your work?
Absolutely. You obviously can go to my website, josephholmesstudios.com. You've got, I have the Overthinkers on all the major podcast platforms. That's where we have fun thinking deeply about art, culture, faith, philosophy. So all the stuff we did today, if you enjoy the energy I brought to this, I've got another co-host that we have fun talking about these kind of things too. So you can check that out at the overthinkersjournal.com, or just looking up the Overthinkers on wherever podcasts are. We also have Overthinkers Facebook group where we've got over 15,000 members now, discussing topics like this and sharing intellectual memes. And then we have you can find my regular culture criticism work at religionunplugged.com. So you can find me in many different places, and I hope that you do.
And you mostly can find me on YouTube at Alyssa's Movie Takes. And as I said at the beginning, I do movie reviews, TV reviews, think pieces from a Christian perspective. I like to come to something and say, like, what is this trying to teach me? Or what is this trying to teach the world? So please feel free to like and share and subscribe, because that's the YouTube thing. But that's my take on the Barbie movie and what it's teaching women, what it's teaching men, and what it teaches us about God. And I look forward to talking with you soon. Thank you.